The way to live is by grace and receptivity. How are we to be changed? 1954. And all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the Spirit. 2 Corinthians 3:18. How? That is the thing that people want to know. They are more or less convinced that Christianity, is true. But how do you get it? A woman who had only been a Christian for a few years sat in the dining car of a train. It was late and she could not find a place to sit in the coach, so she went to the dining car. She sat down next to a man who offered her a cigarette, and she said, "No, thank you. Don't need it." He offered her a drink, and again she said, "No, thank you. I don't need it." He responded, "What do you mean you don't need it?" "Well," she said, "I don't need it. I have something better." He asked her, "Where have you been?" She responded, "Chicago." "What were you doing there?" "Speaking." "On what?" "On religion." And with that, he and his seatmates covered their glasses with their papers. She said, "You don't need to do that. Alcohol, has nothing to do with what I am talking about." "All right," they said, "go ahead and talk to us about what you have." And she began. For 2.5 hours, the whole dining car was gathered around her listening, including the waiter, and no one ordered a drink. One man said to her, "Where did you get this?" She replied, "At the foot of the cross." "How did you get to the foot of the cross?" "At the end of my rope." Then for 2.5 hours, the whole dining car listened to this young woman describe the how of Christianity. That is what people want to know. My text is this: "And all of us, with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the Spirit." Now, in being changed, you have to place the focus of your attention at the right place. For whatever gets your attention gets you. You become like that at whom you habitually gaze. So getting your eyes on the right place is everything. I was speaking in Dr. Weatherhead's church at City Temple, London, and he said to me, "Will you say something to my elders that might encourage them? I have just preached for 10 weeks on how to avoid a nervous breakdown, and I ended up with one, and my elders are upset." Now, Weatherhead is a good psychologist and a great preacher, but I think that he missed his psychological step. If you concentrate for 10 weeks on how to avoid a nervous breakdown, you will probably end up having one. He had his attention concentrated on a nervous breakdown, and whatever gets your attention gets you. He should have turned to the positive side and talked about how to live victoriously. If he had done so, the victory side of life would have had his attention. I saw an announcement in the paper that a certain preacher was going to preach for 8 weeks on the devil. If you concentrate for 8 weeks on the devil, at the end, the devil will probably have you. A man in Florida announced the topic for his Sunday evening service: "The mistakes of Stanley Jones." If he had come to me, I could have told him a lot of mistakes he didn't know anything about, for I knew many more than he would ever know. The next day I saw him in the preachers' meeting which I was addressing. I came up to him and I asked him, "I saw where you preached on my mistakes last night. How many of your audience were converted while you were preaching on the mistakes of Stanley Jones?" He looked a little confused. I said, "While you were preaching on my mistakes, I was preaching on the wonder of Jesus, and we had 25 people converted. How many did you get?" He said, "Well, I have to fight the devil." I said, "My brother, be careful when you fight the devil. Take care that he does not invade you." This preacher looked at the mistakes of other people and lived on them. That is a poor diet, for when you are denouncing others, you are not announcing. And when you are on the prosecutor's stand, you are not on the witness stand. Whatever gets your attention gets you. Now, where are we to fasten our attention? Some people fasten their attention on their past mistakes. They say, "Look what I have done. They are gripped and held captive by their own failures and mistakes. That is a mistake. Don't look back, for if you look back, you go back. Others fashion their attention on the sins and failures of other people. Peter said to Jesus one day, speaking about John, "Lord, and what should this man do?" And Jesus said to him, "What is that to thee? Follow thou me." But there are people who stay outside of the church and outside of Christ because they see some weakness in some disciple of Jesus, and they live on that weakness. Yet Jesus is saying, "What is that to thee? Follow thou me." General Feng, the great Christian general in China, was at one time a marvelous Christian. He led a Bible class every morning, attended by 600 officers, every man with his Bible. But then the general became bitter and resentful and slipped away from Christianity. He began to berate General Chiang Kai-shek and other Chinese Christian leaders. I said to him, "Marshal Feng, I'm afraid that I must quote a passage of Scripture to you." Peter said to Jesus one day, speaking about John, "Lord, and what should this man do?" And Jesus said to him, "What is that to thee? Follow thou me." The general looked at me quizzically and then went on and was more bitter than ever. I stopped him again and I said that I must quote this passage of Scripture again. "What is that to thee? Follow thou me." General Feng pounded his big fist and hit himself on his knees and said, "Good, you've got my attention." You cannot live on somebody else's mistakes, and if you place your eyes upon the hypocrites of the church, you will become one. People tell me that there are hypocrites in the church, and I say, "Come on in, brother. We can have one more." You must not dwell on your resentments. One woman said that all she does during the quiet time is chew on her resentments. Some focus on resentments, others focus on their fears, or some their negative attitude. They say, "I can't do this or that, and am afraid of this and that." And when that happens, you then become negative. Where are you then to place the focus of your eyes? The passage is clear as crystal. Beholding the glory of the Lord, place your eyes on Jesus the Lord. There you have a place where you can let your whole weight down on something that is absolutely trustable. When everything else goes to pieces around you, you can say, "Here is one spot that will not let me down." Place your eyes on Christ. Don't look back or in or around. Look at Jesus. The center of the Christian faith is Christ. We don't begin with God or man. We begin with Jesus. If you begin with God, you don't begin with God. You begin with your ideas about God, and that is not God. You don't begin with man, for if you do, you will begin with the problems of man, and if you begin with a problem, you will probably end up with a problem, and in the meantime, will probably become a problem. One modern minister said, "Without a problem spake he not unto them." We are a problem-obsessed people, and we are problems dealing with problems. I spoke to a group of social workers one day and said, "Aren't you cases dealing with cases?" They laughed, as if to say, "How did you know us?" We don't begin with God and we don't begin with man. We begin with the God-man. Not our ideas of God, but God's idea of himself. Not a verbal word, but a vital word. Jesus is God simplified. Someone asked some children what they thought of Jesus. One little boy said, "Jesus was the best photograph that God ever took." Was he? Yes. Jesus is the express image of God's person. And if God in character is like Jesus, he is a good God and trustable. Another child, when asked about God, said that Jesus is the one who gave God a good reputation. Jesus is God's heart wrapped in flesh and blood, and we see the heart of God through Jesus. We start with Jesus, and it matters what kind of Jesus we start with. Some start with a pallid and pale type of Jesus, a Jesus of ecclesiasticism. I was in a courtroom where they used to try cases in the Inquisition. On the judge's bench was a wooden figure of Christ, and whenever the ecclesiastical judge would announce a sentence against any heretic, the head of Jesus would nod in affirmation. However, underneath the bench was a cord, which the judge pulled, and the head of Jesus nodded at the pull of the string of the judge. That was a Jesus taken captive by ecclesiasticism. That is not the Jesus that I am talking about. I said to you on several occasions that the earliest Christian creed was 3 words: Jesus is Lord. If thou wilt confess with thy mouth that Jesus is Lord, thou shalt be saved. No man can say Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. In both cases, those words are in quotation marks, showing that they were used as an early Christian creed. The Christians had reduced their religion into 3 words. Jesus is Lord. Not will be, but is Lord now. Jesus sits at the right hand of final authority and final absolute authority. Whoever has the first word will have the last word in all human affairs. He is on the throne. He is Lord. That was important. So the early Christians reduced all religion to 3 words. They tell me that all great discoveries are a reduction from complexity to simplicity. The false hypothesis is always very complex. The truth is always simple. If you tell lies, you have to have a very good memory to remember what you said, and the more lies you tell, the better memory you must have. A woman sat at a missionary's table in Japan and said, "Well, suppose I tell them this and that." The missionary responded, "Why not tell them the truth?" And she said, "Why, that's an idea. I had not thought of that." She tried to build up a false world, and it would not hold together. Of all the reductions from complexity to simplicity, this is the greatest. These 3 words, Jesus is Lord. I read an article today that said the greatest thing in life is freedom. I believe in freedom for everybody, everywhere, for I am bound in every man's bondage, and I am free in every man's freedom. However, the first thing in life is not freedom. The first thing in life is bondage. We need to find out what to obey and where to bend the knee. If you make freedom, your personal freedom, the first thing in life, the most important thing in life, it will be a freedom to tie yourself in knots. You will have the freedom to become a problem to yourself and to others. Rather, the first thing humans need to find out is what to obey. The psychologists tell us that there are 3 needs in human nature. The first to belong, the second to have significance, and the third to have reasonable security. The first need is the need to belong. We need to belong to something meaningful or significant, to someone that we can honor and obey. My freedom comes out of that belonging. The aviator is free to fly as long as he obeys the laws of aviation, and I am free to live as long as I obey the laws of God. The first thing to do is to find the Lord. Place your eyes on Jesus. Not Jesus as a nice teacher and a beautiful doer, but the Jesus who is Lord. Put your eyes on that kind of Jesus, and if you do, anything can happen. Put your eyes on Jesus. Cease looking at yourself. Cease looking around at others or your past failure. Put your eyes on Jesus as Lord, and things begin to happen. Thick and fast. Wonderful things happen. Transforming things. But you have not to merely see Jesus and see Jesus as Lord. You have to see him with unveiled face. That is, you must take off your mask. You have to take off the mask. Stop being dishonest with yourself and others and God. Turn real. Come clean with God. Your first step is complete honesty. Pull down your veils. Cease that play acting, that making of yourself what you are not, and come clean with God. Say to God, "Here I am, as I am. I am taking down my veils." Are you prepared to do that? The Oxford group was having 4 absolutes: absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love. They are quite correct in that the first absolute is absolute honesty. You have to be honest with yourself and God, or you don't get anywhere. What are some of the other veils that we need to take down? There are fears, resentments, denominational pride, and self-centeredness. Stand before Jesus as you are. Say, "Here I am. I take down all my veils. There must be nothing between you and him. You must make a full surrender." There are a great many people who are afraid of a full surrender. I was talking to a woman one day who was a bundle of misery. I said, "My sister, surrender your will to God." She looked at me frightened and said, "If I do that, I would be at God's mercy." She thought that God was looking for a chance to make her miserable, when it was her will against God's will that had landed her where she was, and abundant misery. God's will is always your highest interest. The will of God is your highest interest in every single situation there is. God could not will anything except your highest interest. The will of God says, Jesus is my nourishment. I am nourished when I do the will of God. My poison is to place my will against God and ignore His will for me. When I do that, I poison my happiness, my joy, my effectiveness, my everything. But God's will is my nourishment. It is the thing I am made for, as the eye is made for light. And when I do His will, I do my own deepest will. Surrender then is getting life back to where it ought to be, in the hands of God. He gave us life, and now we turn it back and say to God, it is yours. Then God says, all right, you lose it and I will let you find it again, and your life will come back to you cleansed of 1,000 contradictions and sin. And now, having lost your life, you find it again. I am never so much my own as when I am most His. I am never so free as when I am bound to Him. I walk the earth a conqueror. I stand straight when I am low at His feet. With unveiled face I see the glory of the Lord. I surrender to the glory of the Lord. Then what happens? It says, we are changed into His likeness. You don't have to change yourself. You become like that which you gaze with unveiled face. It is effortless. A flower gazes at the sun and unfolds with the very touch of the sun. And so if you look into the face of Jesus, you are being changed into that same image. How do you become like Him? By struggling and trying? No, but by just looking at Him and offering an inner surrender. Do you know that when you surrender to Christ, you are then being made in His likeness? If you are surrendered to Him, you are being made in the likeness of the greatest thing this planet has ever seen, the face of Jesus Christ. To be made like Him makes everything else trivial, of no account. You are beginning a new type of personality. By gazing at the right person, you are being changed into that image. A man wrote me some time ago and said, I feel inferior. My father has disgraced the family and brought shame upon our name. I can't lift up my head, and I am inferior. I wrote back to him and I said, well, now, look at that genealogy of Jesus and see what you find there. Note that Solomon was born of David by Uriah's wife. I said that relationship was in the genealogy of Jesus, but did that stop Jesus? No. Jesus created a new genealogy and gave man a blood transfusion from the Son of God. When you come to Jesus, you receive a blood transfusion of the Son of God. You are grafted into the divine nature. The man wrote back, your letter wiped out all inferiority, and I didn't have to look back to my heredity, and I looked up, and I had a new heredity from God. Suppose that your ancestors have disappointed you and let you down. You can begin a new heredity with the blood transfusion from the Son of God, or an engraftment from the divine nature. When that happens, you are being made into that image. That is a high destiny. Now, how does conversion come about? Perhaps you have initial upset. You come up to the moment of conversion, but you hate like the dickens to change your life. You have got to reverse all of your values, and you have to say that I am wrong. And that is not an easy thing to do for an ego to say. It is difficult to say, I am just wrong. It is upsetting, and you are upset. And that is why people are initially upset when they come to these meetings. We don't apologize for upsetting people, for the purpose is not to upset them, but to set them up for conversion. There is an initial upset in order for an eternal set up. You have to then make a decision, and then comes what we call conversion. There is an experience of a rapid climb, and then life is lived on a higher level. However, as you live life at that higher level, you find that it is still up and down. You experience victory, but then defeat, and then you come to the necessity of finding a deeper cleansing and a deeper filling of the Spirit. You can't go further until you go deeper. And then there is your full surrender to God, and you receive the Holy Spirit. Life climbs again and is lived forever on a higher plateau. Some time ago, I went through the Panama Canal. We ran into a great lock. The gates were closed upon us, and we seemed to be completely helpless. We could not go anywhere except up. We were shutting in, but as the great sluices were opened down beneath, and the great bubbling water filled the space, in just 7 minutes our huge vessel rose 35 feet. It felt effortless. We sailed on at a new level for a time. Then we went into another lock, and again the gates were shut, and again we felt helpless. We were shut in and helpless. We had to surrender to our experiences. And then again, from beneath the boat, the bubbling water began to fill the lock, and we rose 35 more feet. We rose 70 feet in all. When we finished going through the locks, we went out onto Lake Gotham. This is an analogous illustration of what happens in conversion. We are shut in with God. We can't go back. We can't go forward. We feel frustrated, and all we can do is let go and let God, and then His grace takes hold of us and lifts us up and up and up. And the thing that we strove to find, we find effortlessly. We are now up on a higher level. The gates are then opened, and we go out on that new level. However, then we are shut in with God again. We can't go back. We can't go forward. Again, if you let go and you let God, you will be taken to a higher level. The bubbling from beneath will rise you up. And then as the gates open, you will find that you live life on a permanently higher level. We are changed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. But you say, yes, that is very beautiful, but I can't do it. You don't have to do it. The account says, but this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. That is strange. The Lord out there, yes, on the throne, but it also says Spirit, for the Lord's Spirit moved in on the inside. He has chiseled you into the same image from within, and all you have to do is surrender and accept His grace. Conversion comes from the Lord, who is Spirit. You could not do that, but God does it. You cooperate, and the thing that seems impossible to you is now possible. You can walk up to your temptations and struggle and sins and everything, and in His name conquer them. You may say, that is all well and good, but conversion is not for me because I am not one of the mystic types. I want to read to you again from Paul. And all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the Spirit. Paul writes that this experience is for all of us. Who are included in the word all? The Corinthians were included. Who are they? In that day, the morality of Corinthians was very loose. The most derogatory thing that could be said of a person was that he lives like a Corinthian. In a depraved world, the Corinthians were thought to be the worst. Paul put his arm around that group, the Corinthians, and said, all. And Paul included that type of person. If they can get in, you and I can get in. Everyone can get in. And these are the steps. We, with unveiled faces, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being changed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. This comes from the Lord, who is a Spirit. And when you surrender to Him, He takes you over and makes you over. That is the good news. Now, each night, I have given you a chance to come and be changed. Many of you have come forward. Some of you ought to come here tonight. You are not yet a Christian. You have not yet made a decision. You have been on the edge of this thing called conversion, but you have never given yourself to Christ. I am going to give you an opportunity tonight, just as somebody gave me an opportunity one night. I will never cease to be thankful that I had that opportunity and that I came forward and knelt. What somebody did for me, I am going to do for you. I am going to let you come forward and kneel. The second group is for those of you who are in the churches. Many of you are in the churches. For you, Christ has become a name. not a reality, and your faith has grown stale. Your heart is ashes, and there is no kindling fire within your heart. There is nothing contagious about your Christian experience. You are outwardly a Christian, but inwardly the fires are nearly gone out, and you are inwardly dead. I would like you to come too. And then some of you who are inside the churches who say, yes, I am a Christian, but I am afraid that I am not a full Christian. I do not witness. I want to make a full surrender to Christ. I want to be wholly His. I want to be 100% a Christian or nothing. I'm going to give you an invitation that whatever is on your heart, that you come and lay it at the feet of Christ. I believe that something will happen to you where tonight that will make life forever anew. I'm going to dim the lights so that you can be alone with God, as it were. And I am going to ask you who would like to come and meet at this place of prayer to do so. I believe that you won't need any urging from me. I believe that the Spirit of God is here, and He is doing the urging, and you are going to listen to His urging and to your own inner urges, and I believe that you will come. Will come and stay long enough to lay what is on our hearts at His feet and make a full surrender and let Him have us. And then we will come and go in prayer. We will make His whole place an altar of prayer tonight. I would not be ashamed to come. I would be ashamed not to come if I should come. If I am hungry, I am not ashamed to come to the table. If I am ignorant, I am not afraid to go to the library. And if I need God, then I will seek Him. Come.